Your Excellencies, honorable members, distinguished guests, may we please rise for the guest of honor, Her Excellency, the Honorable Baleka Mbete, the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa. Now in the AU anthem.
Let us all unite and celebrate together. The victor song for our liberation. Let us dedicate ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. Oh, fils et filles de l'Afrique, chers du soleil, chers du ciel, faisons de l'Afrique la brève de vie. Let us all unite and sing together to uphold the bonds that frame our destiny. Let us dedicate ourselves to fight together for lasting peace and justice only. Oh, filhos, filhas da África, essência do sol, essência do céu, façamos da África voz da vida. Let us all unite and talk together to give the best we have to Africa. The cradle of mankind, the fount of culture, our pride and hope and break of dawn. Ya amna wa banat Africa, lubu asamsha dendu sama. Africa shajahatu ayat.
Distinguished delegates to the Pan-African Parliament 10th Annual Conference on Women's Rights, Your Excellency, our guest of honor, Madam Baleka Mbete, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency, Honorable Roger Nkodo Dang, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Madam Justine Coulson, UNFPA Deputy Director for East and Southern Region of Africa, Honorable Haidara Aishata Sise, Chairperson of the Pan-African Parliament Women's Caucus, Honorable Members of Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament, all protocol observed. You will all be appropriately welcomed. My humble task at this point is to invite the various speakers for this official opening ceremony of the Pan-African Parliament 10th Annual Conference on Women's Rights. And I would like to first invite to the podium the Honorable Haidara Aishata Sise, Chairperson of the Pan-African Parliament Women's Caucus. Madam.
Honorable Nkodo Roger Dang.
Honorable Roger Nkodo Dang, President of the Pan-African Parliament. Honorable Baleka Bete, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa. The Minister of Women for Zimbabwe, Madam representing Mr. Michael Jean, Secretary General of the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, Madam Justine Coulson, UNFPA Deputy Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, vice chairs of the Women's Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Youth Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament, ambassadors accredited to South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament as well as national trade unions, representatives of the civil society, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. As I begin my speech, and on behalf of all the women in the Pan-African Parliament, I'd like to wish you a warm welcome to Midrand to participate in the 10th annual conference of our organization. Mr. President, I would like to congratulate you yet once again to you as well as the members of your Bureau for the effort that you have undertaken in order to ensure that the voice of African peoples is heard all over the world. For example, you traveled to the American continent, and that led to the lifting of sanctions against Sudan. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your vision. The African women decided, they are aware that we can take our own destiny in our own hands side by side with the men. We shall from now on be actors for sustainable development, for justice, as well as for good governance. The African women that we are shall undertake this combat, and from now on we shall respond to the mismanagement inflicted on the people of Africa through unjustified decisions, for example, that affecting Chad today. That country, because thanks to which Mali soon got her independence, this is a country that counts many sons who have fallen, but it continues to fight against Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, among so many others. Chad, instead of being sanctioned, should actually be recognized for its fight against terrorism. The same sort has been reserved for Guinea, and American senators have been asking Trump to impose sanctions against the DRC. All of that is not acceptable, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, as we come out of this conference, we must come up with very strong resolutions to ask the United States of America to lift the banning of visas for Chad and Guinea and allow African peoples to make decisions on matters that concern them. Africa shall no longer accept this veiled colonization. Dear sisters, changing our direction will not be easy, but we have all the resources that we need so that we can preserve the honor of African people, so that our African continent can take a place on the international scene. In this context of interdependence, the challenges that Africa is confronted with means that we have to change our attitude, our actions, and the way in which we behave. The priorities of Africa must be based on women and the youth, and no continent can be developed if it remains remains on the, if 52% of its population is still hopeless. Most of the refugees, immigration with a lot of victims, the unemployment, natural catastrophes, the pandemics, as well as genital mutilations, really must call on our consciences as mothers, as wives, as sisters. It is inadmissible in the 21st century that we should continue to mix all kinds of between circumcision and FGM and putting at risk millions of girls. We have talked enough. We must move together and act in solidarity. In order to do this, the leaders of Africa must put at the heart of their concerns the protection and the promotion of women and the employment of young people. It is time to deal with the issue of the youth, because there is a proverb that says, if you do not handle the young people will deal with us. The adoption of Agenda 24 at the national level and 2063 at the regional level means that we are fighting against poverty, and it means that our leaders must respect their commitments. We African women were the first victims of conflicts. We encourage the African Union to implement these decisions, the decision that has to do with the management of conflicts that affect Africa by privileging a regional approach. Now, the Sahel region is an example of success, and Resolution 2329 about deploying joint forces in countries is a very major step towards concretizing partnership between Africa United, the European Union and the United Nations. We should congratulate the heads of state of the Sahelian countries, and especially the current President, His Excellency Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, who actually is heading the Sahel region with a lot of conviction. For example, the beginning of the activities of the Sahelian force in Mali. The parliamentarians have a very important role to play in promoting international instruments as well as regional instruments that talk about human rights, and especially as concerns women and the youth people, and especially the Maputo Protocol. We must contribute to the eradication of FGM by sensitizing the public. Agenda 2063 gives us an opportunity because all the countries that have signed it must prepare a strategic plan in order to achieve the strategies for achieving sustainable development. Within the framework of controlling the activities of the executive, we must be careful as parliamentarians. I cannot finish without thanking our technical and development partners, and especially UNFPA for working with us. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, women are determined to write a new chapter, working with women and young people. United and in solidarity, we shall win. May Africa continue to live in dignity so that the African women can live. I wish you a good conference, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the PAP Women's Caucus. I now request Madam Justine Coulson, UNFPA Deputy Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, to address us. Madam.
Thank you. Good morning. Honourable President of the Pan-African Parliament, esteemed guest of honour, the Honourable Baleka Mbete, Honourable Vice Presidents of the Pan-African Parliament, Honourable President of the Pan-African Parliament Women's Caucus, Honourable Members of the Pan-African Parliament, all other honourable guests, and ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It's an honour to address this session of the Pan-African Parliament Annual Women's Conference today, and on behalf of UNFPA, I want to warmly welcome you all to this very important event. This meeting builds on a successful meeting held last year by the Pan-African Parliament Women's Caucus and UNFPA, where we aim to raise awareness of FGM amongst female parliamentarians. At the opening ceremony, your president, the Honourable Roger Nkodo Dang, challenged us to engage men and boys in our deliberations in order for them to understand better the magnitude and the consequences of human rights violations on the sexual and reproductive health of girls and women. So here we are today, all together, men and women, ready to take up the challenge of ending gender inequality, violence against women and girls, and harmful practices such as FGM. All of these threaten not only women's rights and women's security, but also the future development of Africa. As you know, in 2017, the Africa Union has focused on harnessing the demographic dividend across the continent, recognising that if we don't invest in health, in education, in employment opportunities for all, Africa cannot achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, nor can we achieve the targets set under the 2063 Agenda. Sustainable and inclusive development for all cannot be achieved without addressing the linkages between gender equality, empowerment, and economic development. If half of the population is at risk of being denied education, decent work, access to health and other opportunities because of their gender, countries will not be able to realise the economic potential presented by the demographic dividend. We already have a series of international and regional human rights instruments that recognise the importance of achieving equality for women and girls. UN resolutions 1325 and 2250 recognise the role of both women and young people in safeguarding peace and security. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, commonly known as CEDAW, and the Maputo Protocol promote gender equality and specifically condemn FGM. The Sustainable Development Goals uphold the importance of gender equality and call for the end of violence against women and girls and harmful practices such as female genital mutilation. But we have a long way to go. If we just focus on female genital mutilation, about 200 million girls and women around the world are already living with the immediate and long-term sexual and reproductive health consequences of FGM. Almost 30 countries across Africa, the Middle East and Asia continue the practice, and 3 million girls are at risk of being cut every year. So despite the various international and regional commitments, domestication and implementation of these commitments remain a challenge, and only 24 countries on the continent have laws against FGM. Even where a law does exist, we know that FGM is so deeply rooted in the cultural and social norms of some communities that parents feel that if they don't subject their daughters to FGM, they will not be able to marry and will lose their cultural identity. But change is possible. So since 2008, the UNFPA-UNICEF joint programme on ending FGM has been running in 17 countries across Africa. And so far, the key achievements have been impressive. More than 3,000 communities representing 8.5 million people have publicly declared the abandonment of FGM. 1.5 million girls and women have received services, protection and care related to FGM, and over 250 cases of FGM have been prosecuted. We couldn't have reached these achievements without the work of many of the Honourable Members of Parliament here today. And on behalf of UNFPA, I want to thank you for your involvement in national and regional advocacy, community mobilisation and strengthening legal frameworks. But we want to call on you, Honourable Members of Parliament, to do even more to protect the 3 million girls who are at risk of FGM every year. As parliamentarians, you are uniquely placed to bring change, to promote gender equality and to end female genital mutilation. And this is a call out not just to the women parliamentarians. As you'll hear from UNFPA's partner Sonke Gender Justice during the proceedings over the next 2 days, men and boys, as fathers, brothers, husbands and friends, have an important role to play in ending female genital mutilation. I would like to conclude by conveying UNFPA's deep appreciation to the Pan-African Parliament and the Women's Caucus for providing a platform for discussing these important issues, and to the Pan-African Parliament's President and all the male MPs for their solidarity and tireless efforts to promote the rights of women. Together, we can create the future we want. A peaceful Africa free of gender inequality and harmful practices such as FGM, and where the human rights of all are fulfilled. Thank you very much.
Our next address is a video message from Madame Michaëlle Jean. She is the Secretary General of the International Organization of the Francophone. Let's play the video, please.
Madame la Présidente du Caucus des femmes.
Madam Chair of the Women's Caucus, Right Honourable President of the Pan-African Parliament, I would like to speak to you who have all come here in order to put your voice forward in support of the youth and women. The OIF and its network has mobilized itself like you to make things move forward, because today women continue to fight at all levels. It's a peaceful fight. Imagine that it's women who have decided to take up arms. Everywhere they are victims of inequality, of injustice, of violence, of discrimination. Everywhere they are pulled from all sides. But women, through their will, through their courage, through the network and the constructive mobilization of their efforts, have moved forward. As women, we are fighters in all fights. We have the same spirit. We have the general interest at heart, the collective projects. Yes, indeed, when we affirm these rights, that development is not possible without full access by women and girls to education, without access to reproductive health services, without full access to the economic rights, because there are women, hundreds of women, who are part of informal employment and are excluded from the formal network. And they are condemned to precariousness and to unemployment. And democracy is not possible without the representation of women and youth within local communities, within the government, within parliament. It is impossible to have rule of law unless we lift impunity regarding violence against women, whether it's domestic violence or violence in armed conflict. These are the fundamental and inalienable human rights that are being violated. And I'm thinking about the various resolutions that you are going to be discussing. I'm thinking about the development programs for 2015 that takes into account violence against women and girls, but taking into account that of the role that is played by women in the management of conflict and in the peace process remains inadequate. Let's remain vigilant so that the commitments taken are concretely implemented, so that the various principles are applied, so that the support structures for implementation are created. We need to move from words to action. We shouldn't tolerate any regression. And of course, in terms of customs, in terms of culture or religion, we often challenge some of the rights of women. But let's work together, because we have a lot to gain. Peace, security, and prosperity of the world. We have a lot to gain. Thank you.
It is now my singular honor, distinguished delegates, to invite to the podium our guest of honor, the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa, Her Excellency, Madam Baleka Mbete. Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Roger Nkodo Dang, Honorable Haidara Aichata Sise, Chairperson of the PAP Women's Caucus, Honorable Justine Coulson of the UNFPA Deputy Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, Honorable members of the parliaments of Africa that are here represented by delegations from the various member states, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be standing before you. There was a time when I had a seat somewhere here. I think it was in the inaugural Pan-African Parliament. It was also at that time that as a member of the PAP Women's Caucus, I was part of a decision of us women from across Africa going to Liberia to be part of the inauguration of our sister Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. It's with pride that today we observe Liberia running a peaceful election after she has finished her 2 terms where everything went peacefully in spite of the society having gone through a decade and a half of war. Her taking over and constructively and calmly managing her 2 terms and stabilizing that society. We have to congratulate her. And I hope that one day she will come and address us and tell us and share with us how she managed this period. Many will say there haven't been economic developments and there are many issues that still need to be attended to. We agree. But the fact that that country has stabilized, people are able to feel that this is their country and together work on improving various sectors of that society. A lot still needs to be done, but a lot has been done. And we must congratulate our mother, our sister, our leader, Johnson Sirleaf. South Africa remains humbled by the honor accorded to our country to host this august gathering at the 10th Annual Women's Conference of the Pan-African Parliament. It continues to remain our commitment to help to build a strong Pan-African Parliament through which we should build a strong democratic continent. I know, Mr. President, there are still many challenges facing the Parliament, and we are very grateful for your understanding and continuously coming to us and trusting us with the issues that we together must attend to improve the implementation of the host agreement, because I know that we are behind where that is concerned. As elected leaders of our people, You are in the forefront of finding solutions to the challenges that afflict our continent, such as the themes such as international and human rights instruments, in particular those related to the youth, peace and security, and female genital mutilation. I urge you, brothers and sisters, to remain at the coalface of bringing real and lasting solutions to the systemic challenges that continue to befall our continent. I wish us not to rest until there is peace and security prevailing on our continent, for we know that there can be no peace and security without sustainable development. We all have a duty to ensure that the sustainable development and inclusive economies benefiting our youth, women and children is not a mere afterthought, but an essential element of Africa's development. Honorable members, I commend the 10th Annual Women's Conference for placing the painful and unfathomable practice of female genital mutilation on the political agenda, as well as the focus on youth. South Africa is clear and in agreement with the stance taken by CEDAW, the United Nations, and the AU that indeed FGM is a form of discrimination and gender-based violence that infringes on the rights to life, health, and freedom from injury, torture, and degrading treatment and violence of girls and women. The Committee on the Rights of the Child adopted 4 general principles with respect to harmful practices against children relevant to us. Relevant to us is the recommendation that enjoins all nations to ensure that our places of learning provide age-appropriate information on reproductive health and their human rights to our young people. We must continue asking ourselves what we as legislators can do to ensure that our governments take measures to eliminate the harmful practice of FGM. At the seminal session of the 60th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women, it was recognized that FGM was an impediment to the full achievement of gender equality and the sustainable development of women. Regionally, the protocol to the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child and of women, and CEDAW imposes a duty on states to legislate, engage in public awareness against FGM, and to provide support for women affected by it. Question is, how many of us have legislated against FGM back home in our parliaments? The South African Constitution provides for the right to culture compliant with the Bill of Rights and has enacted subsidiary legislation to address FGM. We can all attest to legislation or the ratification of legal instruments that are relevant to us. However, we know that our collective efforts will fall short if we do not address the underlying social norms in our various societies, such as patriarchy and the archaic cultural practices, such as FGM. Critical is our responsibility to ensure that migrant women and children, arguably the most vulnerable, have equal access to support services regardless of their legal status. Honorable members, legislation alone is not sufficient to turn back the practice of FGM. South Africa is making strides by increasingly engaging in initiatives to eliminate this practice. Through national research and sensitization workshops where it is prevalent, in liaison with government departments of health, culture, and education. And we must accept that it's not an easy matter, because where culture is concerned, there's a great deal of sensitivity. And sometimes we don't even want to think, we just feel that it's a no-go zone. But we must stare the reality of the violation of the human rights of girls and women. Experience shows that prevention and awareness raising between government, legislators, civil society, traditional leadership spheres, and partnerships with young and old is key. The South African Parliament wishes the 10th Annual Women's Conference of the PAP fruitful and engaging deliberations, and urge you to continuously use your various platforms to keep these matters on the political agenda, difficult as it is, through ongoing monitoring and evaluation of our collective and individual action. I thank you.
I now invite the Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, His Excellency Honorable Roger Kodo Dang, to deliver the opening speech. Your Excellency.
Son Excellence, Madame
Her Excellency, Madame Balam Kabete, Chairperson of the National Assembly of the South African Republic, and invited guests to this conference, Madam Chair of the Women's Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament, Excellencies, ambassadors and representatives of international organizations accredited to the Republic of South Africa, Chairperson of the Permanent Committee on Women, Gender, Youth, and People Living with Disability, the Deputy Regional Director of UNFPA for Eastern and Southern Africa, honorable experts and panelists, the First Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, Madam the Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, dear colleagues, honorable members, all protocols observed. The Republic of Equatorial Guinea is currently celebrating the anniversary of its independence, and on your behalf, I would like to congratulate this country of the African Union. I would also like to wish a warm welcome to the Pan-African Parliament on the occasion of the opening of the 10th Conference on Women's Affairs and Human Rights of PAP, to all of those who have traveled in order to be with us. We are very happy to have amongst us parliamentarians who, for the next 2 days, will turn the Parliament into a women's conference. I would therefore like to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency Madame Balam Kabete, Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa, who, despite her very busy schedule, has been able to find time in order to be amongst us during this conference. Madam Speaker, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Excellencies, various international instruments have been put in place to promote human rights and address inequalities, including those related to gender equality and women's empowerment. These include the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed in 1948, and its protocols. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, signed in 1979, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. With regard to peace and security, UN Resolution 1325 remains a landmark document in ensuring that gender equality is mainstreamed in all historical documents that consolidate peace building, peacekeeping, conflict resolution, and reconstruction. These instruments define the state's responsibilities for ensuring that the fundamental rights of people are respected. Africa, with all its sons and children, we would like to acknowledge the participation of women and men. Your presence in this conference is highly appreciated because the different decisions that will be taken will be incumbent upon us as men. We would like to thank the Secretary General of the OIF for her rich message. The African Union, its organs, especially the Pan-African Parliament, member states, and the regional economic communities, have been at the forefront of championing the human rights of women with the ratification of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, the Maputo Protocol, which to date has been ratified by 38 AU member states. At the regional level, instruments such as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights of 1981, its protocol, and the Maputo Plan of Action of 2016 also contribute to promoting human rights and gender equality. These efforts have been complemented by the adoption of regional protocols on women, such as the Protocol on Gender and Development, adopted by the Southern African Development Community, SADC. Ladies and gentlemen, at the Pan-African level, the Pan-African Parliament has since its inception addressed issues of women's empowerment, gender equality, and youth, and through major approaches, including the Women's Caucus, the Youth Caucus, and the Committee on Gender, Women, Youth, and People Living with Disability. The Women's Caucus was created and is enshrined as a unique arm of the plenary of our Parliament to lobby, advocate, and entrench women's empowerment and gender equality in the business of the House. PAP has been able to receive important issues for debate, recommendations, and resolutions. Created at the inception of PAP by one of the best founder members who has just addressed us, created at the inception of PAP, the Women's Caucus has been able to focus on issues such as female genital mutilation, child marriage, women in conflict, and gender-based violence, amongst other issues. To date, the Women's Caucus has organized 10 conferences which have provided major platforms for advocating for crucial gender issues and promoting the gender agenda of their respective national parliaments. A permanent committee on women, family, gender, youth, and people with disability has been set up as one of the permanent committees of the Pan-African Parliament. This committee meets twice a year alongside other PAP committees in order to consider issues pertaining to gender and women and people living with disability. It generates debates and reports and makes recommendations for the plenary. Discussion of these reports is one of the core businesses of the Parliament. These reports are discussed comprehensively and lead to the adoption of resolutions that will be implemented in order to promote women's empowerment and gender equality, youth, and people living with disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, the Youth Caucus was established under the same arrangement as the Women's Caucus. However, the Youth Caucus has not taken off fully, owing to the limited number of PAP youth parliamentarians. I would like to recall and invite all members that when you are young, up until the age of 78, then it means that you are still part of the Youth Caucus. It therefore has limited membership and often faces the challenge of a quorum. One of the expectations is that the Parliament would draw benefits from the AU Summit theme for 2017, which is harnessing the demographic dividend through investment in youth. By popularizing the PAP Youth Caucus and arousing enthusiasm for the Youth Summit to be held in Sudan so as to reposition the PAP Youth Caucus to play its role effectively. Ladies and gentlemen, peace and security issues are high on the agenda of the Parliament. The Pan-African Parliament receives a report on these important issues at every ordinary session and debates the reports in order to come out with resolutions specifically aimed at protecting women and girls in conflict situations in pursuance of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 and related resolutions. I am pleased to inform you at this juncture that the AU Peace and Security Council presents an annual report to PAP. This Peace and Security Council has made major strides in responding to gender-based violence during conflict and has, among others, worked with Women, Gender and Development Directorate of the AU Commission through the Peace and Security Department to develop a manual for engendering AU peacekeepers, appointing a special envoy for women in peace, and involving women mediators in peace negotiations and in peace resolutions.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, dear delegates, AU organs such as the Pan-African Parliament are committed to gender issues. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to say that PAP and the AU organs have worked closely in order to advance the African Union Women's Agenda, and I would like to thank our partners, particularly UNFPA, SONKE, and UN Women for their collaboration and support. So I declare open the 10th Annual Conference on Women's Rights on women's issues in particular and human rights in general, whose theme is the role of parliamentarians in promoting international and regional human rights instruments relating to women and youth, peace and security, and female genital mutilation to achieve the demographic dividend so that African Union can live forever. Long live PAP, Asante Sana, Shukran. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Guest of Honor, Madam Baleka Mbete, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa, distinguished delegates to the Pan-African Parliament 10th Annual Conference on Women's Rights, Your Excellency, Honorable Roger Nkodo-Dang, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Madam Justine Coulson, UNFPA Deputy Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa, the Honorable Aidara Aishata Sise, Chairperson of the Pan-African Parliament Women's Caucus, distinguished and honorable members of Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament. This marks the end of the official opening ceremony of the conference. We will proceed to have a group photograph, and after that, have a coffee break. And we'll be expected back here at 11 o'clock to proceed with the conference. I request you all to kindly stand up for the African Union anthem.
Let us all unite and celebrate together the victor song for our liberation. Let us dedicate ourselves to rise together to defend our liberty and unity. Oh, peace.
Whenever